Today, we're focusing on formulating a well-crafted question that guides your study design and also ensures relevance to routine care. Imagine you're ordering pizza for a party. Some love pepperoni, others prefer pineapple. Choosing toppings becomes a balancing act to satisfy everyone's tastes. Similarly, formulating a pragmatic trial question involves balancing various partners' interests: patients, families, clinicians, and policymakers. Our goal is to craft questions that are broadly relevant and applicable in routine care settings. Here's our agenda for today. We'll start by discussing the importance of the research question, introduce the PICOT framework with pragmatic lens, explore how to refine your question to be just right, examine a real-world case study, and conclude with key takeaways and what's next in our series. Starting with a well-defined question determines your study design, the data you'll collect, and how you'll secure funding. It also ensures your research addresses clinical decisions in routine care, making your findings more applicable and valuable. The PICOT framework helps structure your research question. We'll examine each element: population, intervention, comparator, outcome, and time frame through a pragmatic lens, ensuring our questions are grounded in routine care. When defining your population, aim for inclusivity that mirrors routine clinical settings. Use data collected as part of routine care that is readily accessible and limit exclusions to those necessary for safety or feasibility. Next, your intervention should reflect routine care, avoiding artificial enhancements. Allowing provider discretion ensures the intervention's applicability across diverse settings and practitioners. When designing your research question, clearly defining what success means is crucial. For example, are you testing whether an intervention outperforms current practice? Or perhaps you're focused on non-inferiority, where the aim is to show the new intervention isn't worse, but might offer benefits like lower cost, greater convenience, or fewer side effects. Lastly, you might test for equivalence, ensuring your new option performs about the same as the standard treatment. Making this decision up front is vital. It shapes your trial's entire structure, influences your required sample size, and directly impacts your statistical approach. Next, choose a comparator that represents usual care or an active alternative. Placebos are generally unsuitable for pragmatic trials, unless they are part of routine care, as our goal is to assess effectiveness in everyday care. Select outcomes that matter to patients and are routinely collected in clinical practice. Avoid relying on surrogate endpoints unless they are well validated and directly linked to meaningful clinical outcomes. Your study's time frame should align with standard follow-up periods in routine care. Ensure it's long enough to capture the intervention's effects and assess the durability of outcomes. Combining all PICOT elements, your research question becomes a structured inquiry that guides your study design. For example, we can use the template here. In the population of interest, does our intervention compare with our comparator? Change how often our outcome of interest occurs over some pre-specified time frame. A pragmatic question directly informs clinical decisions, integrates seamlessly into existing workflows, and holds significance for various partners. Finding the sweet spot between overly narrow and overly broad research questions is essential. For example, a question like, does a single 10-minute telehealth session improve hemoglobin A1C within 1 week in elderly adults over 75 with type 2 diabetes managed solely on metformin in urban primary care clinics, is likely too narrow. Its specificity limits generalizability and impact. Conversely, the question, does telehealth improve outcomes in chronic disease, is too broad, making it difficult to practically test and implement in everyday settings. The key is to ask a question that's just right, one that strikes the balance between specificity and openness, inviting thoughtful and meaningful responses. For example, in adults over 50 years with poorly controlled type 2 diabetes receiving primary care, does monthly telehealth follow-up by a nurse educator, compared to usual in-person care, reduce hemoglobin A1C at 6 months? This well-focused question addresses a practical, relevant issue while ensuring feasibility, meaningful impact, and generalizability in real-world practice. Before finalizing your research question, assess its feasibility. Ensure the target population can be identified through existing data sources. The intervention can be implemented without disrupting usual care, and outcomes can be measured efficiently. Avoid common pitfalls in formulating research questions. Don't default to measuring easily accessible data if it doesn't align with meaningful outcomes. Clearly define your comparator to ensure interpretability. Resist the temptation to answer multiple questions in one study, which can dilute focus and complicate analysis. Let's explore a real-world application of the PICOT framework. The ENACT LKD trial was conducted in Ontario with the aim of increasing patient access to kidney transplants. This study was a pragmatic, two-arm, parallel group, open-label, registry-based, superiority, cluster randomized trial that lasted more than 4 years. Here is Dr. Amit Garg, the trial's principal investigator, discussing the study's objective.
To generate robust estimates of this intervention effect in this pragmatic cluster randomized trial. To determine if renal program-wide use of this multi-component intervention is superior to usual care in helping eligible patients complete up to 4 key steps towards receiving a kidney transplant. These 4 key steps, statistically analyzed in a multi-state model, were 1. Referral to a transplant center for evaluation, which in Ontario is done by a renal program after they complete required pre-evaluation testing. 2. Having a person contact a transplant center to begin living kidney donor evaluation, where patients with multiple potential donors only had the first one counted. 3. Being added to the deceased donor waitlist. And 4. Receiving a transplant from a deceased or living donor.
This example illustrates how a well-crafted research question can lay the groundwork for a pragmatic trial that is both policy relevant and grounded in everyday clinical challenges, even when the intervention itself is complex. In summary, a well-constructed research question is the foundation of a successful pragmatic trial. Using the PICOT framework, while incorporating insights from partners, ensures your study addresses real-world needs. Strive for a question that's just right, feasible, focused, and impactful. In our next session, we will delve deeper into assessing feasibility and integrating partners' perspectives.